Hello everyone, before the show starts, I just want to say a huge thank you to Watchful Eye Security, who from now on are our main sponsors. We're so grateful to Callum and the brilliant team they've got over there. If you're curious about Watchful Eye Security or you've got security needs, then head over to watchfuleye-ss.co.uk, or you can find them on Facebook or Instagram. They're one of the country's most exciting new security companies, and they're reliable and they're brilliant. I've worked with them before, and that's why it's an honour to have them sponsor us. So head over to their pages, and thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Calis Show. I'm Steve Calis, and I'm joined as always by Kevin Harris. Kevin, are you all right?
Good evening, mate. I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. You're gonna guzzle that mug of tea, and you've got your microphone right by your mouth, so we're gonna have to endure every ounce of that experience.
No.
Oh, there we go. That's good. And today, listeners, we're really honoured to be able to bring you this guest. It's a guest whose book I've been reading for the last couple of days. The book's called Swept Away, A Story of Grief and Acceptance. And it's my pleasure to introduce Becky Graff. Becky, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate your introduction, Steve. Thanks for having me on, and with you as well, Kevin. Thank you.
No worries. It's a pleasure, like I said. So now the way we can do this is you can the way people tend to be more comfortable doing it is that you or they tell us the story or tell us the crux of who they are, because there's aspects of your story that really relate to the series that we've been doing, because we keep talking to people who are the epitome of the triumph of the human spirit, who, nowadays if I have a bad day, I always find myself going, it could be worse. We can survive anything, we can be fine, and your story is one like that. So if you don't mind, would you like to tell people who you are, a bit about yourself and your story?
Yeah, so my name is Becky Graff, and I actually live in the United States over in a state called Utah. And I live here with my husband and currently with my favorite furry friend. His name's Takashi. He's a little Shiba Inu, and he is the light of my life right now. And we spend a lot of time, like my family has spent a lot of time outdoors. And the book that Steve is referring to, Swept Away, is a story of what happened to my family 20 months ago. Actually, 4 days ago was the 20-month anniversary of the event that I'm going to be sharing with you. And it was an event that changed my husband and I's lives forever. We got married early on in 2008. We didn't know that we were ever going to be, if we were going to be able to have children or not. We had the blessing of our first miracle baby in 2016. And then in 2000, then 3 years later, we had our daughter, Alexia, And we love life, you guys. We spent a lot of time, again, enjoying the outdoors where we live, hiking, camping. We do a lot of what's called canyoneering. I'm not sure how many of your listeners may be familiar with that. It's where it's a hike that ends up in a slot canyon, which is like limestone or sorry, I'm getting emotional already. Sandstone cliffs on either side. And sometimes it can get so narrow that you can actually touch either side. So if you're standing, your shoulders may brush or your arms can't. So it can get pretty narrow. And that is something that we love doing with our girls. And there was a wonderful tradition that we had over Easter where we would go down by Moab, which is where Arches, the national park is, and hike a canyon that's called Little Wild Horse. And that is one canyon that I personally have been doing for well over 22 years. I did it when I was a youth, when I was a teenager. I did it when I was first married. I did it while I was pregnant with both of my girls. And so it was a place that we had gone to often. And so for Mother's Day in 2020, we decided that that's where we were going to go. We were going to take our side by side and go explore the area. And then we were going to hike that canyon before we came home. And it was kind of a little bit of a tight timetable because both my husband and I needed to get home for work. I work as an entrepreneur and also as a coach for other entrepreneurs, helping them get clarity in the projects that they're working on. My husband helps me with that. And then he also has another job where he drives.
That's handy. I've got a great idea for an app. So we'll go run that by you later.
Lovely. I love it. Yeah. So Mother's Day, the day after Mother's Day 2020, You just want me to go from there?
Oh, yeah, please just barrel on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
your space.
Okay, so the day after Mother's Day of 2020, we had some technical issues with my brother-in-law's vehicle, his truck. Actually, the battery died. We didn't have jumper cables. We thought we did. And so we were thinking that maybe we just needed to pack up and go home early. And our girls, Ellie, who was 3, and McKinsley, who was 7 at the time, were devastated. As you can imagine, anybody who has kids, when your children want something and then it doesn't happen, their little worlds explode and they're upset and they're whiny and they're crying. And they're just like, oh, come on, you guys promised. And so we tried to figure out like, okay, how can we make this work? So the decision was made that my husband, Tim, would drive to the nearest town 16 miles away called Hanksville, Utah. And that my brother-in-law, myself, my daughters, and our 2 dogs at the time would start on the trail. And that since we're slower, he would just catch up to us. It's something we've done before. And so we're like, all right, that works. So it'll put us behind schedule, like maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, not a big deal. And the moment that we separated the trailhead and gave each other hugs goodbye, nothing would ever be the same. Not too long after that, what is being called the storm of the century rolled in. There was a storm cell that developed out of nowhere. The weather service actually had less than a 15-minute warning that it was even there. And unfortunately, because of the nature of where we were at, the barren location, there was no way to get information about it. It developed really quickly. It dumped a ton of rain and also hail, which is very uncommon for that time of year. And it resulted in a flash flood. And that flash flood caught my daughters and I in a very narrow section of canyon, and there was no way out, and we were swept away. Myself and my daughters should not have survived. Unfortunately, they did not, and I did. And so since May 11th of 2020, it has been a very difficult and very intentional day-to-day focus for Tim and I to kind of figure out what the point of life is next. Right? It was dealing with a lot of things, not only just the traumatic events of what happened, the loss of my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old, the almost loss of my own life. I was dealing with a lot of pretty significant injuries. Some of those were far-reaching and carried over for more than 12 months afterwards. Ended up having to have back surgery, like a bunch of things. And so it's been quite the journey. And in the beginning, I was, as you can imagine, devastated. I didn't know what my purpose, my role, like how come I survived and they didn't. It was a really, really, really just tough, trying time. And through that process, I started to share a little bit of our journey on social media and had some people reach out privately and send me messages saying just how grateful they were that I had chose to share some of the things that Tim and I were doing, the way that we were thinking about things, and just how much it was helping them. And I had somebody ask me, oh my gosh, are you going to write a book? And my first response was, no, that's not going to happen. And then as time went on, I had more and more requests, and I felt that burning, I don't know what I'd call it, desire. It wouldn't be a desire, but there's the awareness that this is something that I did need to share. And so I'm like, okay, I'll write a book someday, right? So I started putting things down, keeping track of different things. Some of what I shared on social media was pulled from my own personal notes, and it was still always going to be sometime. I needed to get my business back. Tim and I were going to launch a coaching program right after we got back from our trip on Mother's Day. And there was a lot of things that had shifted. And I felt like the book was going to be at some point, like further down the road when I was ready. And it just, nothing seemed to like fall into place, if that makes any sense. Like things were just not gelling. They weren't setting. Things that should have been easy were not. And it was just always there in the back of my mind, like, you need to do something different than what you're focused on right now. And so when I finally committed to that, I was able to have it published on the 18th month anniversary of the accident. And that's kind of where we're at now, right? We're just in that vein of the story is out, people are reading it. They're hearing the story of not only what we went through, but also some of the specifics of how we kind of moved through things and how we thought about things. And that is how come we are speaking here today. Is you heard about my story, you're reading the book, and I'm honored to be able to be here and talk a little bit more about those kinds of things.
Yeah, swept away. There it is. You can even tell I've been rampaging through it because the pages are bent where I've been, quickly trying to skip from page to page. So, Becky, thank you so much for telling us that. Because honestly, this is a experience and a conversation that I didn't know how to prepare for. How can you prepare for something like that? And I don't know. So I'm very, very grateful that you would share that with us. So that, the way I think about it is, when I'm reading your book, it occurs to me that you are a woman of some faith. I mean, is that correct?
Yes, I am. I'm a Christian.
Yeah. So, I always find that must be a very, very powerful tool when especially going through what you've been going through. I mean, did you find that was your faith helped you through this? I mean, how important was it?
Oh yeah, I articulate this in the book. My faith is one of the three pillars that have helped my husband and I both get through it. If I didn't have the belief that there was something more, there was a loving Father in heaven or some other person that knew what was going on in this life, I don't know that I would be able to reconcile things as, I don't want to say easy or quickly, because it's not easy and it hasn't been quick, but relatively, right? That there was purpose in this, that there was something good that could come out of something so tragic that ripped my husband and I's world apart. And so, yes, my faith has been a key motivator for me, and combined with our incredible support group and also the skill sets that my husband and I have learned, those three things together has been very powerful in helping us navigate the change, right? Dramatic change, tragic change. When your entire world and your focus and your identity is tied to one thing, and then that shifts, there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of things that you're grasping at to try and find some sort of reason or purpose behind what is going on right now. And oftentimes that's where we can fall into depression and despair and, those really dark places that are, very scary, very lonely and overwhelming. And my faith has definitely been a key piece that's helped me with that.
Yeah, because this is
you
Oh, sorry, Kevin,
faith.
please.
So sorry. You had your faith, and that's great because a lot of people don't have that. But obviously, with any type of thing, usually you find, like, for instance, someone lost their other half in a car accident. There's support groups for most things. I can't imagine that there is anything like that for what happened to yourself. So, did you have anyone reach out to you? Because it was even possible, was it?
Well, so there are groups where grief groups, okay, and those they can encompass a large variety. But to your point, there's loss of loved ones that's like later in life, their spouse or their partner. And for young infants, people who have miscarriages and stillborn babies, there's stuff for that. But for like our dynamic, where they're like school age children, 3 to 9 or whatever, there's not a lot. And then there's also support groups for those that have like teenagers as well, right? Suicides and things like that. So we did find ourselves kind of in this interesting place where there wasn't necessarily any formal groups that we could go to. Again, we were very blessed to have gone through some training before and have access to our mentors that have a background in mental health, over 37 years of behavioral research and how to kind of understand your feelings and your emotions and be able to identify where you're at in certain places and be able to truly choose and navigate where you're at. And just that awareness, the skills of being able to be aware of where we were, what was really happening versus what our brains and our minds were telling us were happening, allowed us to have that time and space to really work through this. And then we did have incredible support groups with our friends, family, community and things like that. We do have some great ties with other families who have lost children, whether that be to cancer or different things like that. So we had an incredible support group and super, super grateful for that.
Yeah, great. That's a great question, Kevin. Actually, that hadn't occurred to me. Of course, it's a such a different situation. So that's
Normally in life, someone can say, "I understand," and that helps because they went through it. You're just not going to get that, are you?
No, not in a case where you have something tragic, and that's true for all tragedies, right? There's not any one person specifically that can really get where you're coming from. They can get elements of it. And to your question earlier, about my faith, that's where my faith steps in, because I believe that God is the one who truly understands what it is that I'm going through, what I'm thinking and feeling in any given moment. And that helps, but we still have to, live in our world around us, right? In our environment, and combat and navigate the situations that we still find ourselves in. And so it was that combination for me that was very, very powerful.
You write in the book, there's some really, really beautiful moments, and one that stood out for me, and may I just say, I'm a security guard. I'm a security officer for a prestigious building, and I made the terrible mistake of reading your book behind my desk, right? And then I wept with you most of the way through the first half of the book, and it was emotional. And for some reason, the thing that got me the most was when I made people stop and ask me behind the desk, "Are you okay?" Because I was having a breakdown. But the part that got me was when you went to the school and they released the balloons, and the kids told you stories, and the parents said to you that your daughter was a great friend and all sorts of stuff. Was it moments like that made you go, "Ah, man, there's still some joy, there's still some pride, there's still this the human, beautiful, real human moments"? I mean, how does that feel now in hindsight to you when you think about it?
Yeah, those moments, that time was extremely tender. In fact, the part that you're talking about happened prior to us even having the funeral. So we hadn't even had the funeral yet. And I just remember being touched so deeply with the goodness and just how incredible it was that we were being showered with so much love, and the impact that our 3-year-old and our 7-year-old had on so many people that we had no clue about. Like, you think about your kids, like they're great, right? They're your own. You kind of have that bias as a parent. They're good kids. But I had no idea the level of impact that they had on others, and also just the goodness of humanity, the overwhelming outpouring of love and support from people we didn't know, from little kids, 4 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, bringing us pictures that they had drawn. And it's bittersweet, because it was like, my girls did that. That's what they did for others. And here we are being the recipient of something that this child, the only way that they know how to reconcile the loss of a good friend is to just give something that made them that reminded them of McKinsley or Alexia. And so it was very tender, I would say bittersweet, because part of me was just like, oh, that's gone for me now. But at the other hand of it, like, how beautiful and wonderful it is that these children are still willing to give. They're so confused. They don't know what's going on. They don't have the realization of what this change really means for them. And for us to be able to show up and still put on that face, like, we're here, we can still do things even though they're hard. It's okay to cry and show that appreciation was a very, very beautiful and very, very tender moment and opportunity.
Yeah, it was really, really lovely to read. I thought that was one of the best. I don't know how to describe it. Human moments I've read in a book like that. For some reason, there was something so powerful about it that really resonated with me. So I just want you to talk about that. So thank you for that. So let's talk about who you and your husband. Let's talk about who you are now. All right. So what's this journey? I mean, the reason I mentioned your faith in the first place is because I'm not particularly religious, but when I talk to people who have these stories, they've been through this trauma that have come out of, they've come out of these terrible things that you assume would level you, and then there they are, they're thriving, they've got a business, they've overcome this thing, and I find it so inspiring, and I find it so moving. And so, who are you now? How did you learn to live with whatever it is that's sitting on your chest, that pain, that grief? And how are you now? Give us the scope. Give us the scoop on it. We want to know.
Yeah, so a lot of it for me, I get very passionate about acceptance and choice, because for anything that happens in life, we have to have a level of acceptance. And a lot of times that's misunderstood. Acceptance is like, oh, I have to agree 100% with it, or it has to go my way, or I can't accept it. But that's not what true acceptance is. Acceptance is simply acknowledging something as it is, and then identifying what it is you might do despite whatever the situation is. For Tim and I, we had to accept that our girls for now are no longer with us. Okay. Our role as mom and dad full time changed. And that's not something that, even if we built a time machine, we couldn't go back and recapture. You know, we're human. We still wish that was the case. But really just asking ourselves, okay, if we can't change this, if this is, you know, where we are now, what do we want to do with it? Do we want to live in the pain and the heartache of it? Because it's there, right? That hole that our girls had, part of you is gone, will never go away. Do we want to live in that? Or do we want to try to bring some more light and hope into the world? Do we want to try and continue on the path that we had laid out for ourselves and our girls, to make an impact, to help people see that they have the opportunity to accept hard things, but then also, despite that, to make a choice in how they want to proceed? Because that ultimately is, you know, our human existence is based and predicated on what we do in any given moment. And there's always going to be the duality of two sides of a coin. All change is difficult, right? It's all uncomfortable. Even the stuff that's good and we're excited about, there's that element of like discomfort. And we get to choose how we perceive that and what we want to do with that. So our mission really is now to continue to living our life in a way where we choose and seek for the positive, the silver linings. It doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the hard things and just pretend that they didn't happen or they're not there, but it's the awareness of what is and then what we can do with that. And it's taken a lot of work, and it's something that we do every single day is, you know, consider what's one good thing that's happened today, or what's one positive thing that I can pull from this experience. And that allows us to show up differently. It allows us to continue to go be with family members when they're having kid birthday parties, things that are still really difficult for us. It allows us to speak to people and talk about, you know, the opportunity for joy and happiness, despite the struggles, despite all of the hard things that people are faced with. We still have choice. We get to accept things and view them the way that we choose to, despite, you know, if it's something that we've done or somebody else has done, or a freak accident, you know, all of the things that just happen. Life is a journey. We don't, unfortunately, get to, you know, lock in gold and cast iron what our future is going to be. We get to act with what happens each and every day. You know, there's nothing that's promised in this life. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone. Their time that we have here is one that we get to make what we want of it. And for Tim and I, we've chosen to help people learn to see in their own life, evaluate maybe effective or ineffective behaviors that they're doing, things that maybe they're stuck on, and help them learn to create a process that can help them through that. That's both personally and professionally, because at the end of the day, like, we're all humans, right? We all seek for the best outcome that we can have in life. We all want happiness. We all want joy, but we all are faced with struggles and things that are difficult for us. And we're just trying to get through that. And so our hope is that by doing what we do, showing up the way that we have, talking about our story and how we've chosen to go through it, that it might help and lift another.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will. It's just it's a story that once I'd read, and initially when I'd read the sort of paragraph that was about you and your book and a summary of your life, I thought, man, to survive that and then to pluck something from it where you can go, okay, here you go, world. We've got something for you. We have an experience. It's not going to break us. We're not going to let it wreck us and keep us in the darkness. Instead of that, we've got some lessons here, and we're going to give them to you so you don't have to endure these terrible things to learn them. We've done it. Here you go. And then that is just, it's amazing. That's unreal. And that's a real theme with people we've spoken to. Our last episode, we spoke to a wonderful guy who has got MS, and his body is essentially always resisting him and decaying, and it's awful. But he's once he was really, really stricken with MS, when it really kicked in and he really started to struggle, he became a skydiver. And I thought, bloody hell, that's good. Yeah. And I think I'm always learning. This podcast has been so powerful for me personally as a father, because I think I can now show my son these one day and say, listen, mate, I know the girl broke up with you. I know you've had a rough day. I know that teacher's a dick, but it could be worse, and there's some wonderful lessons to learn along the way. So actually, Becky, the stuff that you've endured will serve as powerful lessons for people for many years yet. So I'm very grateful for you for having that strength and for communicating it so beautifully. That's very good of you.
Thank you. One of the things for me also, you talk about this gentleman that you interviewed about MS and how he became a skydiver. I noticed in myself through this process that I had a lot of fear surrounding and reasonable, right? Because I was just caught in a flash flood. Like, there was the trauma from the physical standpoint, as well as the emotional side of things. So something just as simple as like the clouds gathering outside, like physiologically, my body goes into this place of fight or flight. Like heart starts racing,
Sure,
sweaty palms. Movies. Okay, you have no idea, maybe you do. It's kind of like you want a white car, and then you don't see any white cars, and all of a sudden the white car you want's everywhere. It's been like that for us, and specifically for me, where it doesn't matter if I'm outside, doesn't matter if I'm watching a show, like any of these sounds, any of like the raindrops, any like my shower, there's been a lot of those physical things that have been a challenge. But I can relate to the skydiving piece. He's got all these things and he's going to do something awesome. I think that for me, it was, I had the desire, and I guess, I don't know if necessarily desire, but I refused to allow fear to hold me stuck. And so that was part of what I illuminated in the book. Our process very specifically was choosing to go into some pretty uncomfortable situations, places where I felt like I was not safe because of the elements and other things like that. But it is truly amazing what we can do when we put our mind to it, when we choose, when we understand the difference between what we perceive to be based on our experiences and what is actually real. We can do a lot. It's amazing. I look back now and was doing a timeline as I was writing the book, and I was amazed. Like, we did all that in 3 months. That doesn't even seem reasonable or like anything. Like, holy cow, we did. But we did, right? And it set the tone for how we can move forward now, 20 months after the accident, to be able to have gone back to the place where it all happened, and not just go back, but to enjoy being there, to not allow those kinds of things to keep us curtailed and completely shift the things that we love to do as a family, but to use it as a marker to lean forward and to continue in joy and hope.
Yeah, that's brave, because it would be much easier to not dig deep and investigate those feelings and let it fester and get worse and make you those sort of things can rot you from the inside out, and instead you face them. So I agree. That's the 100% the best way to go. That's wonderful. So there was one thing I wanted to ask you about specifically, was when it first happened in the book, you write that you wonder how it will affect your relationship with your partner and your husband. I mean, how did it? I mean, were you able to, be there for each other properly? Or, I mean, what does that even look like after that?
Yeah, that was my number one fear. In the ambulance as I was going to the hospital.
That's right. Yeah.
I was talking to the EMTs that were in there with me. And as you can imagine, I was in shock and all sorts of things were going on. But that was one of my core fears, that this was going to destroy our relationship, because statistically, especially here in the US, the death of a child, regardless of age, is a high marker for divorce, separation. There's a lot of blaming that goes on. You should have done this. How come you didn't do this? It was your fault. You weren't watching the kid. They were behind the car when it got backed out, like a whole plethora of things. And specifically in our situation, like Tim and I were not together. I was up the canyon with the girls and he was somewhere else. And so, it was very real to me that he could blame me for what happened. How come you didn't get here? How come you didn't turn around sooner? Or a whole number of things. Okay. And that was my core fear. Like, I remember in the hospital bed, when he showed up to the emergency room, I didn't feel much of anything because I was numb and I was in shock, but I did feel this deep, dark dread that he was going to come up and like be dismissive, that there was going to be something from the get-go that was going to be wrong and off between us. And I am so grateful that it wasn't. And I attribute that to the fact, again, our ability and the skill sets that we've learned about what we can control, what's reasonable, what's not, what are the things that we each individually had a role in with that piece. And so through the course of what happened, he was my rock. I had to lean on him a lot because I was physically unable to do a lot of things for myself, more so than ever before in my entire life. And I struggled with that, but he was always there as a support. And then on the flip side, it seemed to be like we were able to be in a place where we could balance each other. When I was feeling a little bit stronger, he wasn't. And so I was able to be there for him and be able to just listen to him and hold him as he vented out the feelings and, fears and frustrations. And then we're able to work together again with the skills that we have to help the other person come back into a more effective frame of mind. And, loss, grief, trauma, all these things, we like to think that it's a light switch, right? That we work through and one time it's done. And so we just flip the switch and we're on to the next thing. But it doesn't work that way. And so we've been very blessed to be able to communicate, sometimes effectively, sometimes not, about where we are and acknowledge where the emotions are really coming from. And really, it wasn't Tim's fault for anything. It wasn't my fault for anything. Neither one of us, it's not even reasonable to say that either one of us could have controlled the storm, and different pieces like that. We're just very clear on kind of like the role that we each played. And again, it's a choice. Do we want to blame the other person? Do we want to lose our marriage on top of our girls? We've already lost half our family. Is this something that we want? And if it's not, how might we work together on this? How can we communicate more effectively about our feelings and our emotions without placing blame, just simply for what they are? So that has been something that we've been able to do. We've been very blessed that we've grown closer instead of further apart through this.
Great. That's amazing. I'm happy to hear that. And Kevin, do you have a question before we?
Not this time, for once.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are such a wonderful communicator. So, and for podcasting, that's a real treat. So, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. But what I always like to ask is, with your message, if you could beam something into the brain of everybody on Earth, some wisdom, some knowledge, some advice, something, what would you want people to know? Or maybe people who are suffering with very recent trauma. I mean, what is something that you would say to someone like that now that you're fighting, and you might say that the most immediate part of that darkness is behind you, or that you're wrestling it away successfully? What would you say to people now who, if you could get your message across to everybody?
I would say be patient, right? The struggles, the trauma, the stress, the darkness, the pain, it is not forever. And that you have power and you have choice within that. There is hope for something better. And it isn't something that we get to, circumvent. It can't go over or around or up, over, under, around, right? We've got to go through the things that we need to heal. It's no different than any surgery that you might experience. Healing takes intentional time to heal, and it requires attention for that. And so I would just offer that there is joy in the darkness. There is joy on the other side. This struggle that you're experiencing, although it seems like it in the moment, that there's never going to be an end. It's never going to be back to what it was. There's never going to be something more. There is. You just give yourself a little bit of time and patience, and be open to feeling what you feel, and accepting that you feel crummy, you feel sad, you feel these things, but that you get to choose if you want to stay there or not. You can choose something different. There's resources out there for you, depending on your circumstances, that you have access to. There's people who love and care for you. And if maybe in your own demographic there's not right now, I believe that there is a higher power. There's a God who loves and cares for you, and he doesn't want to see you suffer forever, and that we can learn powerful lessons from our struggles.
Thank you, Becky. So was there anything else that, because the very stressful Zoom timer that suddenly emerged on my screen, that's counting down from, we've got 60 seconds left to record. I guess we can record afterwards as well, but it's just attacking me for no reason. But is there anything that you want to people to be aware of the book, and where can they find the book? Where can they find you? Is there anything you want to promote whilst you're here?
Yeah, sure. So my book, Swept Away, A True Story of Grief and Acceptance, is available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback version currently right now. So you can just go to Amazon and search Becky Graff, Swept Away, and it should pop up just fine. I am on all social platforms, Instagram, Facebook. Those are my two primary ones. You can connect with me there. If you'd like to shoot me a personal message, please feel free. I'd love to see how I can support you, and love to hear the feedback from those of you who do read the book and the lessons that you pull from it and how it's helped you in your life. So I'm just very grateful to be in a place in our journey where we can share our story, and again, hope to help others with whatever it is that they may be struggling with.
Cool.